Take a minute to look back at the life you lead right now. What do you see? Do you see the same dull and tainted surroundings? The same grayscale buildings with rows of neatly ordered windows? The same ash-colored concrete sidewalk littered with unrecognizable faces as you contemplate the amount of work that you have to finish by tomorrow? If so, then you have fallen victim to the vicious claws of capitalism. Everything about the concept of an ideal person tethers to the formation of a routine that must be obeyed like a fast. Only then can we efficiently contribute to society. By following this routine, we slowly begin to lose what makes us unique in the first place. We simply become another cog in the machine. It is not an exaggeration to say that even I have fallen into this routine unknowingly. Every morning, I begrudgingly trot out of my dorm to walk the same path to my classes, and I don't even stop to question it. The purpose of this essay is to have an enlightenment. I want to capture a glimpse of what it is like to live life without a scheduled purpose. I want to skip along unrecognized landscapes without a care in the world. I want to experience that refreshing sense of freedom. And to accomplish this, I must move myself to do the one thing most people are afraid of. I must break out of the mold. In order to achieve this during my derive, I will choose my walking path deliberately so that I will walk away from the usual path that I take. This will enable me to see things around Atlanta that I'd previously not been able to see. I started my journey from University Commons. Usually, I would take a left onto Piedmont Avenue, so I instead took a right and began my journey. I was still flanked on either side by residential hubs, so I knew that I had to walk further out in order to escape it all. After walking forwards for a couple minutes, I encountered an intersection that you can use to proceed towards the highway. I decided to continue straight. I could still see traces of Georgia State University around my local area, whether it be the bus, the signs, etc. I could still hear the chatter from the students talking about what class they were headed to. It was only after walking forwards for a few more minutes that I was met with my first major decision. I was on the intersection between Piedmont Avenue and Andrew Young International Boulevard. I decided to take a left onto the Sheraton Hotel and was greeted with an interesting scene. As soon as I walked into Andrew Young International Boulevard, I was suddenly hit with a stark contrast in both colors and emotions. On my left was the Georgia Department of Labor, an astoundingly modern institution with remarkable aesthetics to boot. On my right was the Sheraton Hotel, which was a bleak, monotone building. I could tell the off-gray color of the hotel was starting to fade away at certain points, and with the combination of the black wire doors, it reminded me of a prison. What I immediately thought of was the impact of industrialization in Atlanta. Newer, more important buildings were prioritized while older buildings were forgotten. It saddened me even more knowing that this was simply a product of the capitalistic politicians that prioritize production over preservation. But the more I walked forwards, the more this dichotomy began to shift. The once pristine building sides were now covered with all sorts of graffiti. The change was sudden, but definite. Then, as the building changed, so did the atmosphere. The color changed from marble white fit for the halls of Olympus to a toned-down gray. This change, however, was not limited to one side. I took a look to my left and was surprised. Gone were the prison-like infrastructure, and the true beauty of the Sheraton Hotel was on full display. It was an imposing building with a wave-like architecture that completely changed the vibe of the walk. Moving forwards a bit only further cemented this change. Even though we are currently in the middle of fall, the trees on the left side, which is to say the side with the Sheraton Hotel, were actively flaunting a mesmerizing green color. In contrast, the trees on the right looked as if they were almost withering. Coming towards the intersection between Andrew Young International Boulevard and Cortlandt Street, I came upon an epiphany of sorts. This distinct change in aesthetics somewhat represents the true nature of downtown Atlanta. I'm relatively new to the downtown area, but I can clearly see there exists two different types of people, the upper class and the lower class. While I can nonchalantly put on comfortable clothing to go to my classes, a lot of people, from what I observe, don't have that luxury. But Atlanta isn't only about the struggle, it's also about the comeuppance. The graffiti on the walls represent exactly that, lower class people trying to break into the upper echelons of society. Additionally, the change from the white labor building to the more grey parking lots quite resembled the true nature of capitalism. It has a pretty exterior, but the deeper you go, the more you find out about how ugly it really is. With this thought in my mind, I decided to take a right onto Cortlandt Street from that intersection. The view that greeted me immediately after I turned my head was something that I saw multiple times since I've gotten to Atlanta, but one that I never grew old of. Rows upon rows of majestic buildings, from modern to traditional, pierced the skies in a spectacle that never ceases to amaze me. But I realized that the entire time my head was pointed upwards. I began to lower my gaze and saw something entirely different. What I witnessed before was something like tall trees in the forest that can be seen from miles away. What I see now are more like the small shrubs and grass patches from that forest. Countless small shops, alleyways, parking lots, and buildings surrounded me on either side. It was a unique perspective. Looking up at something so grand was surrounded by so many insignificant pathways. However, the more I walked, the more I could tell that I was getting further and further away from what is considered normal for me. I was staring at sights that I had never seen before, not only in terms of infrastructure, but also in terms of art. Interesting and thought-provoking pieces of graffiti were littered amongst ones that exuded profanity. It was an interesting emotion and weirdly made me smile. After walking for a couple more minutes, I came across yet another intersection, this one between Cortlandt Street and John Portman Boulevard. I turned my head to look at the street and I was greeted with a rather serene atmosphere. I was surprised that there was such a calming place in the middle of the bustling city. It almost looked as if it was disconnected from the rest of reality. Something about it spoke to me, so I turned right to take a better look at it. Walking down John Portman Boulevard gave me a sense of calmness and peacefulness that I never thought that I could experience in downtown Atlanta. The colors, albeit dull and muted, never interrupted your thought process. Like the soundtrack to a movie, it blended in with the scenes and never disrupted the flow of the entire thing. Although there weren't many trees, the ones that remained stood tall and proud. The selection of buildings were few, but held great meaning, such as the remains of the Peachtree Center Athletic Club and the beautiful Hilton Hotel. Honestly speaking, when walking down this stretch of road, I'd forgotten that I was carrying out an assignment. This was it. This was that feeling of escapism that I had desired when I started this walk. I felt like I was free to do anything, and I realized that if I had not participated in this walk, I would have never discovered a place like this. After walking for a few more minutes, I reached the final intersection of this walk. It was between John Portman Boulevard and Piedmont Avenue. I realized that I had essentially just circled back to the same street. I still wanted to walk a bit more, so instead of turning left or right into Piedmont Avenue, I simply continued walking straight. However, after I crossed the road, the sidewalk suddenly ended. I walked a couple steps on the bare grass and came upon the reason as to why the sidewalk abruptly ended. It was because it was the start of the highway. I looked at my left and saw a sign that read South, 7585 HOV Lane. I gazed into the distance and I saw a variety of things. A plethora of new buildings, trees that lined up like soldiers, and even other pathways that merged onto the main highway. I realized that this was true escapism. Exiting through this highway meant graduation from an assortment of different things, not just education. It also signaled the beginning of adulthood, and how if I went out to this highway, no one would be there to hold my hand anymore. I wouldn't have to fall victim to the mundane routine of ordinary people. I could challenge myself to do new things, to experience parts of life that I had never experienced before. But it was still too soon for me. I let out a small sigh and started heading back to my dorm. I don't think this walk could be summarized in a few words. The things I experienced and the realizations I came across aren't very describable. The emotions that surfaced were less tangible than I thought. Although, what I can say is that this walk, And in addition, this project has opened my eyes to plenty of different ideas. Psychogeography as a concept initially confused me. I'd always looked at cities and maps as just that, stoic pieces of architecture that only served a singular purpose, to increase the efficiency of society. But now, I see them not as tools meant for production, but a window into a whole new life. I can't say that I have fully grasped the sense of freedom that I wanted from this walk, but it has given me insight into what to look out for, and along the way it showed me some sights that I will never forget.